Hello, class. Welcome to our lecture video on definitional arguments in our textbook, right? They make quite a few distinctions about arguments of definition, and I think that the strategies they suggest are very helpful for our academic arguments because we are defining terms both in SA2 and we will be defining terms in SA3. So to kind of review SA2, right? When we think of arguments of definition, they help determine what something or someone is, right? And again, we want to start with the idea of formal versus operational definitions. And a formal definition is the dictionary definition, whereas the operational definition is the definition in terms of the process, a definition in context needed to determine the existence of an item or phenomenon. So what do you think about what are the criteria for operational definitions? Duration, quantity, time, composition, things of that nature. So it's literally how the definition operates. Now, we may, for essay number 2, right, we may start with the simple definition identity, being who or what a person or thing is. But again, when you start thinking about identity as it operates in our culture and society, right, the qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and or expressions that make a person or a group. One can regard the categorizing of identity as positive or destructive. And then we have this idea of psychological identity related to self-image, self-esteem, and individuality. And I think all of these ideas help to form an operational definition of identity as related to our SA2 topic on stereotypes and stereotyping. Now, I also want to point out how when you think about definitions, there's kind of this ladder of abstraction in that things get more specific as you move up the ladder. And I think that from a definitional standpoint, Google has more of the more basic definitions. And then you have something like dictionary.com or Merriam-Webster, which is going to be a little bit more specific and with their definitions and give you more options. And then if you want to get into a more academic definitional source, use the Oxford English Dictionary, which is not available for free online. However, it is available through our library database system. If you click on articles and databases, click on O for Oxford English Dictionary. Might be something that comes in handy as you're defining your terms in your academic arguments. Notice how the operational definition of identity goes beyond just the simple, the fact of being who or what a person is, right? Qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and or expressions, positive or destructive. And again, when we celebrate our identities and we celebrate diversity, it becomes positive. When we stereotype, right, and discriminate and use double standards and hasty generalizations, it becomes destructive. So again, notice how the definition becomes a little bit more specific on dictionary.com. Condition or character as to who a person or what a thing is, the qualities, beliefs, etc., that distinguish or identify a person or thing, right? The sense of self, providing sameness and continuity and personality over time, and sometimes disturbed in mental illnesses as schizophrenia. So identity becomes much more abstract as we think about the different definitions of the term. Now, for the purpose of essay number 2, the idea of looking at identity with a focus on stereotypes, right? Google's definition, a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. There's your formal definition. Notice how the operational definition becomes more related to culture and society, how a stereotype leads to causes these destructive aspects of identity, how it leads to effects. In social psychology, a stereotype is an overgeneralized belief about a particular category of people. It is an expectation that people might have about every person of a particular group. Now, right away, based on this operational definition, I immediately think of dogmatism, every person of a particular group, that logical fallacy we've discussed earlier in the semester. I think of hasty generalizations. I think of double standards, right? So again, as we move further, and you might find yourself quoting from the dictionary in Academic Argument Essay 2 and perhaps in Academic Argument Essay 3 as well, if you wanted to bring in a more specific definition of stereotype that becomes a little bit more operational from a cultural and societal standpoint, a simplified and standardized conception or image invested with special meaning and held in common by members of a group. Again, does this possibly relate to the fallacy of bandwagoning as well? Again, I think about this notion of dogmatism and hasty generalizations. So when you're analyzing the negative effects of stereotyping on society, on culture with relation to identity, it's important to keep in mind how logical fallacies play a role in the perpetualization, right, of these stereotypes, of these destructive identity conceptions, if you would. So now what I'd like to do is think about the notion of the argument of definition strategies the book presents us, right? The notion of formal definitions versus operational definitions, and their suggestions, and I think they suggest quite wisely in the chapter that you should consider formal and operational definitions as you're constructing your arguments, and keep in mind Toulmin's strategy, right? And remember, the Toulmin method emphasizes the notion of a warrant, right? You have a claim, you have grounds, right, which are the reasons, but then you have to have that warrant. And it's the assumption that links the grounds to the claim, right? So think about essay 1. You analyze Kathy Freston's argument that if Americans want to reduce carbon emissions, they should eat less meat. If Americans want to help the environment, they should eat less meat. Now, that warrant is that Americans care about the environment. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are indifferent about environmental concerns. So you have to have that warrant. And furthermore, you want to qualify, right, your claims. The qualifiers, words that limit the claim. Some, many, presumably, right? What does Freston say? Less meat. We should eat less meat. She's not advocating for a full vegetarian diet. Now, the interesting thing is that when you bring qualifiers in, it helps your audience understand that you know there are instances where your claim may not be correct. It's the use of Rogerian argument. So when you use qualifiers, right, in your arguments, again, not only is that an effective use of Toulmin's strategy, but it also reflects the tenets of Rogerian argument as well, and the notion of empathy and understanding that there are multiple perspectives, which is the opposite of the fallacy of dogmatism. So keeping all these ideas in mind, right, our essay number 3. So I think you could definitely apply Toulmin's strategy, right, to essay number 2 and the idea of stereotyping and identity, and what is your claim, what is your reason, and how do the assumptions that link the claim to the grounds, the claim to the reason or reasons, right? How's that warrant playing a role, right? And I think that it's a helpful strategy for essay 2, and it's going to be a helpful strategy for essay 3, right? So just as you're looking at identity as your general subject and your specific topic is more about stereotypes and the negative effects of stereotyping on an identity, on society, on our culture in essay 2. Essay 3 is also 2 ideas to focus on. The general idea is surveillance, but the more specific idea is privacy and the violation of privacy. when you look at the specific type of surveillance or surveillance systems that you choose for SA3, you want to make sure that you're recognizing the counter argument, right? Yes, it makes our society and culture safer, but at what point is it violating our privacy? So now the key term, right? Because we all know what surveillance is the idea of being watched, whether it's online, through your telephones, listening, viewing, reading, recording, right? Cameras, online surveillance, telephone surveillance, public surveillance, private surveillance. There's all sorts of options to think about. But more importantly, at what point does it violate our privacy rights? So the key is, how do we define privacy? The right to privacy refers to the concept that one's personal information is protected from public scrutiny. U.S. Justice Louis Brandeis called it the right to be left alone, right? While not explicitly stated, some amendments provide some protections. So not only do we have constitutional definitions of privacy, but we also have the Bill of Rights, which also defines privacy. So now the question is, at what point is it a violation of privacy? The various possible surveillance systems and structures that you might analyze for SA3. The definition from Google: the state or condition of being free from being observed or disturbed by other people. And yet now a little bit, right? The state of being free from public attention. Now we get a little bit more specific and less abstract. State of being apart from other people or concealed from their view. The state of being free from unwanted or undue intrusion. Ooh, how do we define it as unwanted or undue intrusion? Again, that qualifier. What kind of intrusion? Unwanted, undue, right? Or disturbance in one's private life or affairs. Freedom to be left alone, again. Freedom from damaging publicity, public scrutiny, secret surveillance, or unauthorized disclosure of one's personal data or information, as by a government, corporation, or individual. So I think that we could see how these definitions of privacy become more specific in numbers 2 and 3 on dictionary.com, but I think that you could definitely use this as a starting point as you focus on the term and how it operates in relation to surveillance and our rights, not only provided in the Constitution, but the Bill of Rights as well. So hopefully this video is helpful on how arguments of definition are essential to Toulmin strategy, to Rogerian strategy, and to establishing both the formal and operational definitions of our subject matter and topics as we are developing our own arguments. So thanks for listening and watching. I hope this was helpful, and please let me know if you have any questions.